Hello, hello. Welcome again to Reading is Fantastical. I'm Mr. Lauren, and this episode is for you, the parents, guardians, educators, school programs, and friends of our youth who want to help our young people improve their reading skills. Now, I have a very special guest, and it's Michelle Paschke, and she is an educator in our school system here in Arizona. However, she has a very special role, and I'll let her introduce herself, her title, and what she does. But I will say, I have to give a disclaimer. I do know Michelle and her family. Okay, our kids played together in a high school marching band. Now, quick story, real funny. As a new band parent, I was just coming in and they have been seasoned parents and they knew kind of what to do and everything else. And so I came in and they're kind of giving assignments and telling some of the new parents, okay, this is what we do, this is how we can go out to the schools and this is assignments. And there's one guy standing there looking at me. And I'm looking around, he's looking at me, and I'll let Michelle tell her his nickname if she like it, but his name is Michael. And so he came up and said, "You're going with us," something like that. I said, "Oh, okay, all right." So I kind of got scooped up, and he said, I'm driving, and you're gonna hang with us, and that's it." So okay. And so every time we had a game, I'm rolling with Michael. So there it is, So that's our funny story. And these guys are just great. I just love them to death. And so when I just do our interactions, found out that Michelle is an educator, and I didn't know that I would be doing this podcast at the time. And so we came up and said, "Hey, Michelle, would you mind being our first guest to this platform?" And she agreed. So I appreciate it. And so without further ado, we have Michelle Paschke. There you are.
Hi. So yeah, my husband's nickname is Grizz.
Very cool name.
Yeah. So I'm Michelle Paschke. I am a reading specialist in Arizona. I teach in the Tempe Elementary School District. I have previously taught in Roosevelt and then moved to Tempe. I've taught first, second, and third grades. And I've on my third year of being a reading specialist in Arizona.
Awesome. So as a reading specialist, that entails what? What exactly? So when you say reading specialist, what does that mean and what exactly do you do day to day?
So I am no longer a classroom teacher, which I do miss sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
having that family dynamic in the classroom. Um, but I really do enjoy my role because that's specifically why I got my master's in reading was to be a move on when reading teacher, and that's what I am.
Oh,
So
mhm.
day-to-day basis, if we do testing
Mhm.
beginning, middle, and end of the year, and just assessing kids along the way. But primarily during the day, I see groups of kids for a 30-minute time span. And I do support two schools. So in my
Wow.
role, I pull 10 30-minute groups every day.
Wow.
So, and it's very specific to the kiddos. Either I'm helping with letters and sounds, primarily with our kindergarten friends,
Mhm.
up into third grade. My
Okay.
role is only kindergarten through third grade,
Okay.
and up into third grade, where we're helping kids with their fluency, adding with their vocabulary and their comprehension with their reading. So it just depends on the group. So I have to be very flexible. People in my role have to be very flexible because if you're seeing a gap, then you want to address that right away and then keep moving along. So
So a
it's
gap meaning what exactly when you say gap?
maybe perhaps, if we're reading pretty well, but maybe some kids are not understanding um, a specific phonics skill. Like we've had to go back in one group in particular and just work on the silent E
Oh.
and that the vowel says its name instead of saying the sound like ah. So
Mhm.
like the word bake, it would be a instead of it saying back. and it would be a short vowel instead of a long vowel. So
Mhm.
we've gone back and just touched on some gaps and then we can keep moving forward. So you have to be really flexible and just know your kiddos.
Now you mentioned just where you're just going through the sounds, you mentioned there was a three-letter phrase that you mentioned that you kind of focus on. I think you meant the consonant, vowel, something like that that you mentioned.
Yes. Yeah, so it's a consonant vowel consonant word. So after we know our letters and sounds, we will start with vowel consonant or consonant vowel words like
Mhm.
no or it and be able to sound out those words. So it'd be it, but we want them to blend words. So we start with two-letter words and then three-letter words. So teacher talk would be CVC.
Okay.
Um,
CBC. Okay.
and an adult and parent talk would be it's a consonant, a vowel, and then a consonant.
Mhm.
So we just want them to sound out words and then blend them together and then be able to keep working on that where they don't have to blend anymore. It's more automatic in their brain, and then they might have to sound it out in their brain, but they're able to read it more fluently.
Yes. So as a parent, when I had my child, when she was really young, we used to go, even in the house, just point out different things. I would just say it, and she would listen to me. We went to the library. We let her pick out various books and such. So, and then kind of let them read the pictures, and then associate the pictures with the words. So, what sort of things that perhaps can our parents do, starting from the beginning and before they actually get to the school level? What kind of things perhaps can the parents do to kind of get the kids prepared and ready once they start a school program? And so where you would pick them up.
So I think that it knowing your letters,
Knowing your
what they
letters.
look
Okay.
like, and even if they could write them, that would be
Oh,
wonderful if
right,
they
right.
knew the sounds that the letters make.
Hmm.
And sometimes that's hard because we're just readers now. As adults, we don't really think about how words and letters sound. We just read them.
Right.
And so there are long vowels and short vowels, and
Hmm.
there are vowel teams, and things make different letters and combinations of letters make different sounds. So it's sometimes, and I would even say it was hard for me because I wasn't an educator when my kids were first going to school. And I would read to them or they would read to me, and I'm like, no, it doesn't say that. And I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, that word actually does say that, And so I think just really, if you're going into kindergarten,
Mm,
letters and sounds are great. But also just reading to your child and
right.
don't read the same book over and over and over and over
I
again,
see. Yeah.
even though they really like it. Because I have had some parents, they're like, they can read this book. I'm like, well, how many times have you read the book to them? They're like, hundreds. I'm like, yeah, they've memorized the book.
They've
They're not reading
memorized
it.
the book.
They've just memorized the book, which is
Ah,
not horrible. Obviously,
right.
you're reading to your child, but having a variety and maybe even words that they wouldn't understand or they don't know, talk about that word. What does it mean? How can you use it in a different sentence? Things like that.
Okay. Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome. So you mentioned now, so now we have our parents able to read to them. And I think we talked before about once you get to the library to let the kids kind of decide or pick the books for themselves. Because I think
Mhm.
that was advice from yourself. Is that kind of what you encourage?
Yeah, and I would even get one of those children librarians to help
Oh, right,
you.
right, right.
I mean, it does obviously start with picture books and things
Yes.
like that, but I mean, I'm a frequenter of the Tempe Public Library,
Hmm.
and I go down into the kids section
Hmm.
and, see what new books there are, but I do know like they're getting into some chapter books and the library will color code it for them.
Yes.
So, before they're reading, you want a lot of picture books, and I
Hmm.
would let your kiddos explore, see what they like. You can check out, I don't know, like 30 books at a
Right,
time,
right, right.
and then you read that book and then look it up on YouTube. Maybe there's somebody else reading it on YouTube and you can watch it on your smart TV or on your
Mhm.
tablet, um, and see how they read the book differently. That might
Okay.
be fun.
Okay.
I always, when I taught first grade, we read we read a book every day for 1 year and or for one school year. So we read 180 books in
Woohoo, nice.
180 days. But I liked it when we could incorporate that book into something else that was kinesthetic.
Yes,
If it
yes.
was something about a cupcake party, then we made cupcakes out of paper and added
Right.
sprinkles or whatever, or wrote sentences about that. But that would also be something that parents could do at home. That would
Sure.
be a thing for them to do.
Oh, that sounds like a almost like a field trip type thing. You're maybe in the summer, weekend or whatever,
Yeah,
you found this book. Hey, let's go figure out how to do kites or whatever
yeah.
and do something simple or how to make paper airplanes or something. I don't know. Whatever is kind of fun. Now you talked about a cool story where you were in a grocery store. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, yes, it's probably one of my favorite stories. So, I was in the grocery store, not very many people were in the produce section, and I saw this mom, and she was speaking Korean. I happened to know like that specific language because I knew somebody else that spoke Korean. It was very
Mhm.
different than Chinese or Japanese, and
Sure.
so her child was in the cart with with her, and they were buying broccoli. And then she would say, "Oh, we put broccoli in stir fry, and I cook it with this, and touch the broccoli and feel what it." And then she said everything again in Korean.
Wow. Very
And
cool.
so her daughter would respond in English and in Korean, or she would say, "Oh, remember we need this. Do you remember what it's called?" And it was bok choy.
Yeah.
And "Oh, I cooked bok choy. Do you remember when your grandmother came and she made it with this?" Or, and there was a conversation with every vegetable or fruit that they picked up. But it was awesome because she said it in Korean and in English. So
Mhm.
she's building that dialogue with both their languages.
Right.
And I went up to this woman. I'm like, "Thank you so much." Thank you so much because she's building that
Right,
vocabulary
right,
and
right.
she's building those connections.
Hmm.
And I had an instructor over the summer when I took a very long science of reading class,
Hmm.
and she said, for kids that are dual language learners, that she calls it the language that they're loved in at home.
Loved it at
So,
home. Oh, that's
yeah,
cool.
so that's stuck with me too. I'm like, "Oh, well, what language are they loved in at home?"
Yeah.
And teachers are like, "What?" I'm like, "Do they speak Spanish? Are they Arabic? What do
Hmm.
they what do they speak at home?" They're like, "Oh, I really like that."
That's great you mentioned that because so the kids that you encounter, so because you mentioned Arabic, so you encounter lots of different languages or kids that speak the various languages. So how are they identified once they get in school? They enter, you mentioned kindergarten through the end of second grade, I guess, right? Or is it into third grade?
So I teach kindergarten through third.
Okay, so now how are the kids identified? How do you know how did they get on your radar in the school?
Oh, so we do a beginning of the year assessment on
Okay,
reading specifically,
okay,
and any students that are below the benchmark then become on my radar.
okay. And so is it a separate class that I think you mentioned it's outside the curriculum. So how does that work where once they're identified, then you do, and you mentioned 10, 30-minute sessions,
Hmm.
right? Is it during the school day or after
Yeah.
school? And how does that work for your particular school district, I would imagine. Yes.
So mine's during the school day,
Hmm.
and after kids are on our radar, we
Yes.
reassess them using the curriculum that we use,
Right.
and then I form them into groups.
Okay.
At one of my schools, we have a lot of students,
Hmm.
and so our program is blessed to have three reading IAs. So it's not just me doing the doing groupings and teaching kids to read. I also have three other ladies that work with me.
Okay.
And at my other school, I don't have as many kids on my radar.
Hmm.
And so it's just me.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So IA, I'm assuming that's intervention,
Academic IA, intervention assistant.
intervention assistant. Okay, great, great, great. And so how do the parents feel about once they've assessed, they've been tested, and then they come on your radar? How do the parents, what is your interaction with the parents? How does that work? Do they welcome it, or do they kind of feel some sort of way about it, or what are your thoughts, or what have you encountered?
No, usually it's always very positive.
Oh, good, good, good.
I've never really had a parent that didn't want their child to
Mhm.
see me.
Right, right. It makes sense.
Or one of us. Usually parents have some kind of inkling that their kid is struggling a little bit.
Ah,
And
okay.
so they're glad that they're getting the help that they need.
So what are some other things that the parents can do to improve? Obviously, we talked about going to library, identifying, reading to them. Are there anything additional that perhaps can do to help their kids along oh, I think we talked about earlier about um, certain times through the school year that they will, oh, no, up to the third grade. Now, there's a separate test that's here for state that they'll receive, right? And can we talk about that or?
Yeah, I mean, in third grade, so our the district that I work in is really great where we will identify those kids and try and help them, work with them to help them to get them reading up to grade level.
Okay.
So we identify them in kindergarten and start working with them then. So hopefully they can be out of needing outside reading intervention from outside of the classroom.
Okay.
Um, but there is a state test called AASA.
Okay.
And so we want to avoid kids not passing that. So we want all of our kiddos to pass the reading portion. In Arizona, if they do not pass that, then there are certain exceptions, but kids usually do not move into the fourth grade if
Okay.
they don't pass that. You can show growth in a lot of other ways where the
Okay.
kiddos can move up into fourth grade, but we want to avoid that. We want everybody to pass, obviously.
Gotcha. Now, you mentioned before that sometimes there's certain challenges that kids have, and that sometimes they're not, and you can kind of tell when a parent perhaps has worked with their kids and that they kind of know their way around the book. But I think you mentioned that some kids don't have a concepts of print, I think you mentioned.
Yes, yeah. Um, I think that it's hard. I think that there's if you're not active with your kiddos and reading or doing things with them. Um, Unfortunately, there are those cases where I've had kids that don't know how to open a book. They don't know
Um,
where it starts. They
I don't
don't
know where it
know what
starts.
letters are. Sometimes they don't know the letters in their name.
Right, right.
And that's what we're trying to avoid, but we can't go home and educate the parents on how to do that. So I'm hoping that your podcast will help
Okay.
get parents, oh, I do need to do that. My parents did that with me. I need to
Yeah,
do that with my
yeah.
kiddos too.
So I find that
Don't just
fun.
put a tablet in front of their face.
Right, right. Get it. That's the
Yeah.
whole so I guess there's another concept that the whole social media and just getting games and that being the babysitter. So that's kind of one of the reasons I'm like, they can't be the babysitter. Perhaps we can go back old school and just reading and creating some of the nuances or the technology that we have, like this podcast, and just reading to them. So we can kind of take old school and new school and kind of put it together. So that way kids can at least enjoy maybe sometime during the day, take a break from the social media, from the games, and just watch and listen to reading and get engaged and have that as a fun thing to do, you
Hmm.
know. So
Yeah.
that's interesting that they wouldn't know where to start. That's very interesting. I was my mouth was hit the ground, you know.
Yeah. Sad.
Very
It's sad.
got
Yeah.
it. Interesting. Let me see. I'm trying to look through my notes here for I love that whole language that you're loved in at home. That to me, that just
Mhm.
stuck out. I had to put that in bold, my little notes. So that was so much fun with that. Let's see here. So are there any other thoughts as we kind of wrap up that perhaps we can pass on to our friends or families and things they can do to encourage our kids to learn and just embrace the whole fun of reading or with reading?
Well, I think that just knowing what your kids are totally into at the
Okay.
moment, which, it changes
Yeah, you said at the
all the
moment.
time.
Yeah.
But if your daughter's totally interested in baseball and football, let's
Mhm.
go find some books.
Right.
And if your son's totally into rocks and dinosaurs and digging, then find books like that or go and do like one of those field trips like you were
Yeah.
talking about,
Yeah.
and expose them to those kinds of things until they get a little tired of it and then they switch what they want to be into. That's
Yeah.
what the beauty is about the public library, is that you don't have to buy the books. They're going to
Mhm.
like it for, a couple months. And then if they switch, then you just return those books and get new ones. And the books that they're totally into, then those are
Mhm.
the ones,
Mhm.
the specialty ones are like grandma and grandpa, buy them the books,
Yes.
that they might read a couple times, but I think every kid should have a library card and be
Yes. Yes.
responsible and that kind of stuff. But then they feel like they're in charge of their learning too.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
Now, that kind of reminds me, and for some reason, the name escapes me, but I was years ago, I read a book called Gifted Hands and Think Big. And in fact, it's the HUD secretary for President Trump's first administration. And
Uh-huh.
so he was the neuroscience person, the doctor. His name escapes me. It'll come to me, and I can perhaps put the information in the notes. But in reading that book, once again, so Think Big, he mentioned that him and his brother were below reading level when they were in kindergarten, first grade, and such. So their mother didn't have a great education as well at all. And so what she would do is say, "Hey, what are you interested in doing?" So, in fact, you mentioned about rocks. So you said, okay, you like rocks. So go ahead and write a one page, um, a narrative on rocks, anything about. So they thought they wouldn't get away with stuff. Oh, we just kind of write about rocks. So they made it very basic. But each week they had to write this little one-page report on anything they wanted. And through the
Uh-huh.
course of the year, they got better. And the whole idea is they were doing research, they were
Uh-huh.
writing, and they
Hmm.
developed a love for learning. And they thought they were getting away
Hmm.
with stuff, but they really weren't because she kind of put that on them and she let them have the guidance and gave them the
Uh-huh.
authority to write on anything they wanted. But over time, they got better. Of course, now he did very wonderful. Became I think at Johns Hopkins, he became the neurosurgeon and was, the brain surgeon for that division. I can't, his name escapes me. But I just thought, wow, that was fascinating how she didn't have a great education, but by just giving them things to do, little small projects that they thought they
Hmm.
were slick at, but eventually, like I said, they got better at writing, research, and just knowledge.
Yeah.
And they went off and did wonderful things. So yeah, that's Ben
Yeah.
Carson. That's Ben Carson.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
have to look
So
that up.
yeah, Think Big, the second one was Gifted Hands. And so
Hmm.
very interesting book. But anyway, books. And so when you mentioned that, I said, yeah, that's a fun thing, So give them the autonomy and they did wonderful. So thank you very much, Michelle. We really appreciate you taking the time. Really love our reading educators. I appreciate you, adore you guys. And so hopefully parents and family, you guys have learned some neat techniques, embracing those things. Take your kids to the library, take those opportunities just throughout the day and life to stop and just, hey, let's talk about that. You mentioned about, hey, there's cars coming by. What do the letters mean? And the different colors, how did they get there? Just using those learning opportunities to create fun things for them to do and research. And so those
Hmm.
little things can become very important and fun things for them to do. So thank you once again. We really appreciate it. And you have a wonderful, happy new year. Thank you very much. Okay, take care. All right, bye-bye.